Okay, welcome to today's verdict. I'm your host and trial attorney, David Lesh. We had two great guests today. A council member was here talking about the film industry and its impact on local communities. You'll want to hear what he has to say. The second guest we have is coming to us from the Illegal Aid Society, talking to us a little about criminal youth and what we can do to maybe alleviate the stress on a child or a youth who's arrested, and possibly make sure that this doesn't affect them for the rest of their life. It's an important show, so stay tuned. Today's verdict starts right now. All right, welcome back to today's verdict. I'm your host and trial attorney, David Lesh. We have joining us today council member Christopher Marte. Christopher has never been on the show before. We're excited to have him. How you doing today, Christopher?
I'm doing great. Weather's perfect and happy to be on.
Yeah, the weather it's really 80 degrees today, which for late October is a little unusual, but I'm fairly excited, to be honest with you.
Great.
So I want to talk a little bit today about the topic that we have on tap, which is the film industry. I live on the Upper East Side of Manhattan. That seems to be an area where there is constantly films that are being in progress. Yes, streets are always shut down. Storefronts are not around when that happens. You got to walk around to the other side of the block. Yeah. What's going on how does it even start when you want to produce a film in New York? What's your first step? Does the Hollywood company come to New York? Do you go to the Hollywood company? How does it usually work?
So, there are a lot of incentives created by the city and state to have the film industry do their production, do their coverage here. But most of the times, a lot of the film industries want to come to our city, right? For example, I represent Chinatown, Lower East Side, Little Italy, Soho, Tribeca. All these neighborhoods want to be coverage, and people want to see them in movies, especially the blockbuster movies that take a really long time to produce. And so they come and fill out an application and they receive a permit. However, most city council members and community boards only get notified probably 2 weeks before the production actually happens. And so that's really hard for us to do the proper outreach to our small businesses, to the communities, so then they could be aware of what's going to happen in their building, on their street, or in their neighborhood.
When they get a permit, let's say the owner of the film or the director, the producer, whoever gets the permit, does the permit require them to pay not just the city, I guess, for the right to be able to film in the neighborhood of Soho or Tribeca, but does the permit also require them to give a certain amount of money to the business owners in the area, or do they just give all the money to the city and the city decides what to do?
Yeah, they give the money to the city. It goes to their general fund, which covers everything that the city does. But the people that get harmed the most are small businesses. At least in our neighborhoods, you see some of these productions take weeks, and they really crowd up the sidewalks. Sometimes they put barricades so people can't actually even see the small business. And what we've been hearing a lot, especially from our Chinatown small business owners, is that they could receive no customers for days because people think they're shut down because of the production happening right on the street. And so we decided to introduce a new bill, Intro 1225, that require small business services to do a study and report back on a study and how these small businesses are negatively impacted by the film industry. And this would be kind of the first step to understanding how much consequences there are to our mom and pop shops and what we can do to alleviate that, whether it's having the film industry, give them money directly or have some sort of partnership. I think what we want to find out first is what's the data behind it? How much are they losing? How much are they impacting these communities, especially neighborhoods that have a lot of filming, right? So Times Square, the Upper East Side, the Lower East Side, Greenpoint, Williamsburg. And I think we need the information first because we hear it and we hear all the narratives, and people find it frustrating that they can't even sometimes even open up their own business because of all the equipment that's surrounding them. And so we want to use this as a first step to figure out next actions to support our mom and pop shops.
So how are you going to um, acquire the data? Do you just go from business to business and ask them how much revenue do you do on the days, on certain days? I mean, how do you do it? I mean, the only way you got to do it is you have to have a production in the area to see how much they've lost, right?
You can actually go back in time. We know
Oh,
where people have gotten permits to close off streets or sidewalks, and we can go to business owners, and if owners want to share their information of how much revenues they made and the disruption period of that time and how it negatively affect them, we can use that to build a framework. Every production is different. There's large scale, big productions that have 100 people on the street. But then there's smaller ones as well, especially with independent filmmakers. And so I think it's getting a better understanding of like how each of these different sizes affect these small businesses. But then we can also track it real time, right? This gives small business services 1 year to gather all the information and create a plan moving forward. And so there is time for us to kind of monitor the situation as it's happening.
I mean, you might see there might even be some luncheonettes or some food places that actually did better, only because all the different people who were working on the film just kept going in and buying food, or although they usually do provide their own food when they were on the film on the set, right?
Yeah.
But I guess it's a way to see, like the clothing stores, there's no traffic that can get through the streets or the areas, or parking is hard, their cars can't get there. I wonder if you'd be able to actually pay people retroactively, to tell the city, these businesses in Chinatown or these businesses in Soho lost, 10% of their income for the year because it was Christmas time. And that's when they get all the shoppers to come down there, the tourists. So why don't you cut them a check for $20,000 each? That would be great, wouldn't it?
Yeah, that would be great. And I'm sure many small businesses will love that. But it's also finding a way in real time how these film production crews can also give back to our communities, right? Not just depending on our city to kind of support them because of something that they really have limited influence on. And so whether it's creating partnerships, so for example, you mentioned Luncheonette, I'm sure, coffee shops in the neighborhood or a lot of like our dim sum places or sandwich shops will love to provide those meals to those workers, right? And so it's not only, getting a refund, but also figuring out ways to work together.
All right, now, so you're a council member of District 1. So tell us a little about you, because we've never met before. What made you decide to be a council member? How did you get involved in the community?
Yeah, so I was born and raised on the Lower East Side, so I've been living in this district practically my whole life. And one of the reasons why I started getting involved, even before running for elected office, was because of displacement. We've experienced hyper gentrification, whether it's in Chinatown, Little Italy, even in Tribeca and Soho, where a lot of longtime residents can't afford to live there anymore, or whether they've been illegally evicted or legally evicted.
Now, why is that? Is that just because it's just gotten so trendy and expensive to live in the Lower East Side area, or is it because is that the hot area to be in? So rents go up?
Yeah, partially, but we also see, destabilization of rent regulated apartments. We see what they call Frankenstein apartments, where they take two rent stabilized units, combine them together, and then take them off the stabilization system that they're in. But sometimes landlords just refuse to give people a lease. And we've gotten dozens of people every week coming to our office and saying, why hasn't my landlord given me a lease? And so that's what motivated me. You know, my dad was a bodega owner who was priced out. I had a lot of family and friends that lived in this neighborhood that can no longer live here. And so I ran a campaign solely on land use decisions, right? Whether it's the Soho NoHo upzoning or other plans that have been plaguing Lower Manhattan and, you know, continuing to add more luxury developments, but not true affordable housing. And so that's what we've been working on our first year and a half in office, is making sure that people can remain in the neighborhood that they help build and that they love.
You know, because they give the taste of the neighborhood. I mean, my office is in the South Bronx. We're surrounded by bodegas here, and you know they're the lifeline. And you know, even if the South Bronx starts getting trendy and everybody wants to be in the area, or however you want to, you know, sobro, if you want to call it that, I wouldn't want the bodegas to go. I mean, that's what makes the South Bronx, for me at least. And nobody should be pushed out of their neighborhood only because it becomes trendy. I just ask you, what can you do about it, though? That's what I'm wondering. What are your thoughts on that, really?
Yeah, so we have an amazing plan. It's a community-based rezoning plan called the Chinatown Working Group, where we can maximize affordability in many areas of our district, and we can also add protection for tenants to remain in place. And so we've been pushing this plan. We've been meeting with city planning, the mayor's office, to do this new, unique rezoning package that will really protect a lot of the residents in the buildings that are currently here. As you know, most places in the city, if they build a luxury tower, they get 30% affordable housing. But we are constantly asking affordable to whom, right? You got to make almost $90,000 to live in those studio apartments, which is unaffordable to many New Yorkers. And so fighting to pass new legislation to make sure that we can lower the levels of income for new developments, but also make sure that 30% is the bare minimum that a building has. We get closer to 50%, like what we got with Essex Street Crossing, where 50% of the units in 8 buildings are truly affordable for seniors, but for people who are formerly homeless. And so there's a lot we can do in the city council. I just feel like we need the political will to do it.
Well, I want to thank you very much, Councilmember Marty, for coming on. It was nice meeting you, and we expect you to come back and share a little bit of the things you've been doing in the community.
Yeah, I'll love to come back. And thank you again, David.
It's our pleasure. All right, stay with us. Today's Verdict has much more coming up right after this.
I'm an ex-drug dealer, and I'll be your sub today. Can you see anything different as a pill?
No.
You don't know?
Fentanyl is being mixed into everything now. There's only one thing that will save somebody's life. That is naloxone nasal spray.
Fentanyl, it's cheap, it's potent, and it's profitable.
Why would drug dealers put a lethal dose of fentanyl in drugs if they know it's so harmful?
Really just all about the money.
I just didn't realize that one pill could change your whole life.
More kids should know.
Dear moms and dads, what you have achieved here today is going to help us and our futures. It is why we are coming up on stage to collect your diplomas.
You know it's true.
Mom, we love you always.
Everything I do,
When you graduate, they graduate. Visit finishyourdiploma.org to find free and supportive adult education centers near you.
All right, welcome to today's Verdict. I'm your host, David Lesh. We have joining us today, Marty Feidemann. Marty, how you doing today?
I'm good, thank you.
You know, Marty, it's baseball season, and this reminds me of like coming in you're like a relief pitcher coming in today. Give us a little bit of insight into and you're coming in at the last second, but first of all, we appreciate you coming in and discussing us about youth bills and criminal justice. We really do appreciate it. Tell us a little bit before we start, who are you, if you could?
Yeah, I was with the Legal Aid Society for almost 4 years doing juvenile and criminal defense work in a variety of roles, both as a staff attorney, a trainer, a manager, a supervisor. and also as somebody that's worked on policy issues and interfacing with other entities throughout the city and the state, and in fact in the country on juvenile justice issues. And along with a few of my colleagues, and one of the people that drafted several years ago the bill that we now know as Senate Bill number 1099, Assembly Bill 1963, having to do with protecting the rights of children and adolescents during the process of law enforcement interrogations.
All right, so I looked through the bill, or at least some of the things we're advocating for in terms of legal aid. Let's start with the first one: access to an attorney prior to police interrogation. Tell me a little bit about that one.
Yeah. Everybody knows from watching TV and the movies that the police, if they want to question somebody, they have to read them their Miranda warnings. The Miranda warnings are an outgrowth Supreme Court decision back in 1964, I believe, having to do with the Fifth Amendment right to remain silent. And it's our position. It's not just our position, but frankly, it's a matter of science based on decades of research that's been done by countless social scientists, that youth under the age of 18, and you always get into a little trouble when you try and draw a specific line in the sand with regards to age, but generally speaking, youth under the age of 18 really lack the wherewithal developmentally to fully appreciate the fundamental nature of those rights that are at issue with the Fifth Amendment and the right to remain silent. The constitutional standard for a valid waiver of that right to remain silent after the Miranda warnings is that it has to be knowing, intelligent, and voluntary. And kids really just are not in a place, particularly under the inherently stressful circumstances of the custodial interrogation, to be able to think in terms of future consequences. So what we're saying is, what this bill says is that rather than tell a youth that they have the right to an attorney if they want one, since they can't appreciate the value of that right under those circumstances, this law would mandate consultation with an attorney. This law would mandate that if the police want to question a youth, before they can do so, before they can read the Miranda warnings, they must connect that youth with an attorney who can consult with them about the nature of an interrogation.
I remember years ago, 2020, the television program did a feature on the adolescent brain. Stossel was the one who was discussing it, and really talked about how it's not mature enough yet. And that's why your teenage daughter or teenage son does something that's a little outrageous and you don't understand what were they thinking. Sure. It's not that they're thinking anything differently. Their brain hasn't matured yet. So you can almost imagine somebody who's going to be arrested just want to move on with the situation and say, I don't want a lawyer, let's just get this over with and right. Whatever I have to do so I can go home, that type of thing, right? That's
absolutely right. They have no impulse control. I shouldn't say no impulse control, but they have not developed a full sense of impulse control. They are very much oriented towards what's happening in the moment, not able to really contemplate future consequences for anything that they do, which is one reason why adolescents get into so much trouble. And I don't just mean legal trouble, but any kind of trouble, because they're just thinking in terms of, what do I feel will benefit me or make my life easier right now? And that leads to bad decision-making. And the last thing in the world we want is bad decision-making when it comes to considering the exercise of a constitutional right.
I know there's also one part of the bill about transporting children to the precinct without notifying a parent. What do you mean by that?
Well, that before the police can transport a child to the precinct, once there has been an arrest, once they've stopped the youth on the street and taken the youth into custody, they have to first make an effort to contact family. Family should know that their youth has been picked up, taken into custody, and is going to be brought to the precinct. It's very simple. And in this age,
what's the benefit of that? I'm just curious. I mean,
sure.
Because it doesn't mean that they're going to hand the child back over to the mom. What's the
but
benefit?
It means the parents have an opportunity to get involved on behalf of their youth at the earliest possible occasion. We've seen countless situations where a youth is picked up by the police, a youth is brought to the precinct, a youth is held at the precinct for an indefinite period of time before a parent is ever contacted. And by the time a parent is contacted, there's a scramble to get to the precinct, or they may not have an opportunity to get there. They may not have an opportunity to get somebody else to go in on their behalf, with the police sitting there chomping at the bits, wanting to begin an interrogation. So this is just a matter of, while this bill contemplates the fact that parents in and of themselves are not sufficient protection to ensure that kids' Fifth Amendment rights are not trampled on, we do nevertheless highly value the involvement and the participation of parents in the whole process, and believe that they have a right to be engaged in a part of it from the very beginning. Particularly if it can be done in a way that doesn't interfere with a police work.
Makes me think about the exonerated five, who were interrogated as youth and really coerced into false confessions. Maybe if their families were around or people were notified, maybe they wouldn't have just said, I just want to go home, or I just want to get on with my life.
Yeah.
Instead of confessing to something they didn't do.
Sure, absolutely. So while we know that parents aren't adequate protection, we also know that parents' participation and involvement is critical. We know from the exonerated five that the presence of a parent in and of itself was not sufficient protection, because in a number of those cases, and we've seen in countless other cases, ways in which the police department legally manages to sort of coerce and convince the parents that getting the kid and pressuring the kid to waive the right to remain silent is the best thing to do. And parents,
I didn't even realize that the parents, can be coerced as well.
Absolutely. We have a video of a youth who was brought in for questioning, and with his mother, and the youth said, "No, I don't want to talk." The police stepped out. They came back in. They said to his mother, "Don't you want to hear what," and I'm making up a name, "don't you want to hear what Johnny did?" And the mother says, "Yes," because mom was never given an opportunity beforehand to sit with Johnny and speak privately with Johnny about what happened. And the police said, "Don't you want to know what Johnny did?" Mom said, "Yes." And they said to her, "Well, why don't you go ahead and ask him?" So they essentially turned mom into the interrogator to ask Johnny what he did and have Johnny make a statement about what he did after he had asserted his right to remain silent to the police. And that was absolutely legal, arguably, that the police did that. But it's improper. It's totally improper.
Let's talk about once the child is in the judicial system, and now judges whether they could sentence the child to I don't know, either to community service or to treatment programs. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think that we know that the least amount of involvement with the system is generally what's best for the youth, but that there is a need sometimes for youth to have system intervention and to have the services that are provided for youth, to the youth. And we also know and believe that having those services provided in the least restrictive environment possible and the most community-based environment possible is what's most beneficial. And there has been, over the last number of years, a movement, fortunately, within the juvenile justice system to focus less on confinement, less on placement, and more on community-based services for those kids for whom there is that need.
What tips would you give to a parent who's watching today who wants to make sure their child is protected, or if things go astray and they're not around? Would you tell a parent to make sure your child knows to not talk to the police, to ask for me? What would you say?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. First and foremost would be, by all means, do not have your child waive the right to remain silent. Speak to an attorney first. Even if this bill isn't passed, every family, every child, and every parent has the right to say to the police, "No, we're not giving up that right to remain silent. We do want to consult with an attorney." And then if the police want to try and be able to interrogate the youth, they will first have to have the youth speak to an attorney, or they'll just process the kid, release him, and or send him to court. So every parent and every child should, under all circumstances, if they're ever in that situation, say, "First, I want to talk to an attorney," and get the advice and get the input of an attorney who is trained and understands and appreciates and knows this system, that can help them fully understand and be aware of all the potential repercussions of waiving that right to remain silent.
Well, Marty, I don't know how Lisa Freeman would have been today, but you were terrific. And thanks for
Thank
standing
you so
in
much.
like a strong relief pitcher. Watch the playoff. And you're welcome back anytime to give us a little bit of an update about the bill, if you could.
My pleasure. Thank you very much for having me and giving me an
Sure.
opportunity to talk about it.
Our pleasure. All right, stay with us. Today's verdict has so much more right after this.
Every day, thousands of kids start vaping. And I can't let this happen to my kid. Of course, it's awkward to talk to your kids about the dangers of vaping. Hey, bestie, how's sketches, mate? It's hard to get their attention. Ready? Go. Yes, look at that. You didn't turn yours over. So if you want to talk to your kids about the dangers of vaping, you have to get it trending. Right, Backpack Kid?
Let's do it.
First, invite your kid to do the vape talk. Let's try this. All right.
Why is he here?
Yeah, I gotta get it trending, honey.
Come on.
To the left. To the right. Let's go.
Oh, honey, can we talk?
Yeah, what's up?
I see a lot of your friends vaping.
Visit talkaboutVaping.org for tips on when and how to have the vape talk.
Where did the time go? Somehow I lost all those years. Where did the time go? I don't know how I got here. Oh, how did I get here?
You've done the hard part. You quit smoking. Now do the easy part and get scanned for lung cancer. If you smoked, you may still be at risk, but early detection could save your life. Talk to your doctor and learn more at savedbythescan.org.
Hey, boss. Okay.
I said I'm fine.
See you in the morning with the frosted Superman, but it wasn't on it, and we lost it.
You can talk to me.
It's been really, really hard for me.
Well, that's all we have for today. I'd like to thank both our guests for joining us, and of course, you, the viewers, for watching. If you have an issue or a topic that you'd like to see on a future edition of today's verdict, feel free to email me at davidlesh@bronxnet.org. Until the next time, know your issues, reach a verdict. I'll see you in 2 weeks.